there, but I think this is such a big topic that it can be used in both personal and professional life. So why not, right? So with that, I'm going to talk about what boundaries are, what they're not, how you can create them, and a little bit on how you can stick to them. I've sprinkled in some videos that I hope all play for us so that you don't have to hear me talk the whole time through all the slides. And I'm going to do my best to keep it interesting. And I was just thinking, oh my God, what did Sarah say do with your nerves in the presentation? So I'm just going to channel all the nerves through here. So let's talk about it a little bit. There is going to be some audience participation. Um, so yeah, so let's get into it. All right, so boundaries. I have a quote by Brene Brown, who I read and Google often. So she will be sprinkled through this. And she says, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others. And I know that really lends to personal life, but I think that it could be very helpful in our work life too. I think that I dare to say that as we work on our jobs, we really want to be there. We want to do a good job, but sometimes we can get steeped in culture, right? And not always in a bad way. We don't have ill intention, but we can get steeped in culture and our boundaries sort of get lost. And so hopefully this is a refresher and I add value to either your personal or your professional life today in some way. So I thought that was a great quote to add in. And I can't see. Oh, there we go. So let's define this from an author that I really like. Her name is Nedra Taub. She has a book called Set Boundaries, Find Peace. Boundaries are, see, I can't see that. Boundaries are a gateway to healthy relationships. Some of my writing isn't coming across in the presentation, so that's why I'm squinting. Pardon me. Um, let's talk a little bit about what you feel like a boundary is. So if someone wouldn't mind, you don't have to come off camera, but if you'd like to chime in, when you hear the term boundary, what are your thoughts? Anybody?
Oh, sorry, the lights behind me. I wanted to come on camera so you weren't alone, but like you can't see me because I'm sitting. Anyway, well, when I think of boundaries, um, what comes to mind is, oh goodness, I don't know how to express this, but um, that I used to think a boundary was sort of trying to stop others' actions.
Mm.
And I always felt a little powerless with that. And then some of my recent um, reading, or maybe it was it might have been, honestly, it might have been a Brene Brown podcast, was like, the boundary is actually, a sign of respect for yourself. And boundaries are things that are what you can do to be actionable. So you can't, for instance, I can't tell my mom, you can't tell me to do that. But what I can say is, Mom, I'm setting a boundary where I'm going to walk away if you say this. So then I can always be
Yeah.
successful because boundaries are about actions that you can do to protect yourself and your mental health and your well-being. So their boundaries are acknowledgments of the power you do have to protect yourself. If sorry, I I don't know how to describe it as well as her, but that's what I think of when I think of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Anyone else?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Sarah. I think I've had to really shift the way that I've understood boundaries. So it sounds like, to me, even the word boundary itself sounds like a limitation, or like, like you're kind of like cutting something off. And
Yep.
so I, and then I saw this one quote and it was talking about how boundaries are essentially in relationships, you wanting to keep someone around. And so having these things that maintain the relationship instead of restrict the relationship. So that was a really helpful reframe for me.
That's excellent. Yes. Alexa says, can't use mic, but for me, being mindful of someone's comfort and being accountable. Absolutely. Absolutely. Those are in the mix. And oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I can share after.
No, go ahead. This is our
Um,
dialogue.
Yeah, I think boundaries is just like a really been a kind of a new thing for a lot of people, and realizing that you don't have to cut people off, or you don't have to be silenced in situations where you don't feel comfortable or like don't feel good, but you don't feel like it's enough to like, start a fight or confront. It's a really good way of like healthily like navigating relationships in a healthy way, that is almost kind of flexible too and kind of validating. And just because you were okay with something before doesn't mean you still have to be okay with it now. And that's when it's a good time to set up a boundary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, all of these are so good. Y'all just did the whole presentation. We can go home now. So, um, these are all good. And what I think about boundaries, is everything that everyone has just said. And Lindsay is so right. I didn't start setting boundaries until late in my 30s, my early 40s. And at that time, because of traumatic events and my family of origin, and just the way things had been modeled to me, my boundaries were very rigid. So I was in that like cutting off phase, like you do this, you're out, you're kicked to the curb. But I hadn't got to the point in my boundary work where I realized that you could have different types of boundaries. Um, and these are here on the screen. Rigid, the person's boundary is too close. So for me in my healing journey, yeah, of course, my boundaries were very rigid because I was in protection mode of myself. But you can get to the point where, you're isolating yourself. And one thing that I have experienced and that I know without a shadow of a doubt is that anytime you're working through boundaries or a healing journey, or you're going through things like that, you need safe places. You need safe places and people, to be able to vent. To be able to vent to people who have the space and the capacity for that, and to be able to share so that you can talk through things and heal, whether that's through a therapist or your mom, your aunt, your friend, or whoever that's going to be. And then there's diffuse. This person's boundary is too open, like, they're all over the place. And then flexible. The person's boundary is neither too close or too open. And really, that's what we want to work toward. And I thought, having rigid boundaries was super bad, and I was a horrible person, and I felt bad all the time, but it was just part of the journey. And I think that getting the knowledge that I needed really helped me. So as I was working through this, I found out about a gentleman, and Sarah may know about this gentleman, Salvador Minuchin. He did a lot of work around the family structure, family therapy, and one of his high level thoughts was, yeah, we can get therapy for the child, but why don't we look at the family of origin? Why don't we look at the entire family unit as it is, and get therapy for everybody? And then that way, we teach everybody how to have healthy boundaries, and then there's a more healthy environment. And so he goes a little bit into more of an explanation, and I want to share those. So rigid boundaries are when boundaries are restrictive and very limiting. It allows for minimal contact from those that are outside of the family or the work system. These type of boundaries create isolation. Those in the family or work system do not have an environment of support and affection in the family. Or if you're at work, you're kind of an island all to yourself. And I mean, whole corporations can operate like this, right? So getting people out of silos is really important as it relates to the work environment. And working in collaboration, I found that is so much more better than working in silos. And then diffuse boundaries. When boundaries are diffuse, they are unclear. This is a lack of boundaries that leads to a breakdown. Lack of boundaries allows for other people to intrude on you, what your beliefs are, what your rights are, your responsibilities sometimes, and they become over involved. So this could be like if you have a person who's codependent in your life and they really have the guiding principles and the values to really want to help, but they overreach because they're getting their value or their self-worth from what they're doing instead of how they're being. Um, and I know that story well. Boundaries are healthy when they are clear. A combination of the first two types of boundaries is ideal. They should be established so everyone understands them, but not so rigid that it becomes unhealthy for family or like today we're talking about work. Any questions or comments there? Okay. Another definition for boundaries to kind of mix it up a little bit. Boundaries are expectations and needs that help you feel safe and comfortable in relationships. I can tell you that when I started setting boundaries in my life and in my work life, the peace that bombarded me was amazing. So, if you want more peace in your life, right? To rid yourself of, we're going to have anxiety around, things in life. But I can tell you, and I am a witness, that setting healthy boundaries will bring peace into your life. That is going to be one of the results as you get better and better at doing that. It definitely takes courage, especially when we're talking about work. Why? Because the systems and processes are already set up, they're in place. So, we may think to ourselves, well, who am I to stir up the pot or whatever. But a lot of times we can be a catalyst of change, right? And usually boundaries, I will say in my experience, they start out small. And that's the best way to move the needle towards change is to make small changes, unless you're like me and you just come in asking for everything. However, change is necessary. And I believe Lindsay or Sarah, one of you all said it earlier. Sometimes as you set boundaries, you have to come back in and reestablish them, and that's okay too. Why? Because as humans, we grow, we evolve, we change, we don't stay the same. The one thing we can count on in life and in work life is change. And the companies that get left behind are the companies that don't really believe that or that don't get on board. Think about what comes to my mind is Blockbuster. I don't know if anybody ever rented a movie at Blockbuster, but once Redbox came and once Netflix came, like nobody needed Blockbuster. It was, obsolete. Nobody needed that anymore. So we evolve, we grow, we change, and so should our boundaries. Sarah mentioned this early, like boundaries are not requests. So I have two statements here. Let's talk about this a little bit. Don't talk to me that way. I don't remain in conversation with people that talk to me that way. Which one is the boundary? Anybody? Throw it in the chat.
The second one.
Yep, the second one. The second one. And Lindsay, did you have something you wanted to add?
No.
Okay. I'm just going. I couldn't remember. Yeah, the second one. This might not be the best way to remember it, but it's my way, right? To hold myself accountable. And I probably should find a better word, but I always think to myself, like a boundary is a request and a consequence, right? Because I can only be in control of myself. So I'm gonna say what my expectation is or what my need is, and then what happens if that's crossed over or it's broken? What happens then? What do I need to do? What do I need to say? Um, okay. Trying to figure out how to. There we go. All right. Why do we need workplace boundaries? That's not coming up. I don't know why it's not coming up. But the simple answer is your career should not come at the expense of your well-being. Period. You have a voice, use it. Now, I thought to myself, okay, Missy, That's not always the easiest thing to do. And what this statement boils down to for me is one thing that I learned about business, that I do on the side, which is sell t-shirts. And you could sell ice cream, you could sell anything. But one thing I learned is that um, your business is not going to go any higher than your personal development, right? And so we've got to continually evolve, personally develop, so that our businesses, or in this case, our boundaries do as well. And we've got to make it up in our mind that, okay, this may be tough, but I need to garner the courage and I need to speak up for myself because we are our best advocates at work, right? The company is great. However, the company is always going to act in its best interest, right? It's just like for me with my t-shirts. I'm always going to act in my best interest. If I have a $35 t-shirt, I'm not going to sell it to you for $10. I'll never make any money like that, right? So your career should not come at the expense of your well-being. That is a huge statement, maybe one that we even need to walk away and think about. Um, what is it costing me to not set boundaries, whether in my personal life or at work, right? And remember, I said that setting boundaries can be a huge catalyst for change, creating new systems, processes. I know has been a lot of that in the youth department, new systems, new processes, and not because the other ones were bad. We just need to catch up with time, right? We needed to evolve. So um, here we go. Let's talk a little bit about that. I think that what I've learned to do, especially since I've taken this position, is constantly check in with myself, especially when I'm overwhelmed or I'm frustrated. I'm like, okay. I'm not only thinking solution, I'm thinking boundary. And that could be, okay, that works for you. You're in another department. That does not work for me. It doesn't work for the team. And so, how can we shift? How can we adjust? How can I again push the needle to set a new boundary that not only works for you, but it works for me? It works for us. And again, you have to have courage to be able to do that. It's a big part of setting boundaries. And it's a big part of knowing and understand your worth and what you bring to the table. And I think a lot of times, like I said, we can get caught up in the culture and we forget, right? We forget. And so boundaries are a good way to remember. Ways to tell it's time to set a boundary, and I'm going to buzz through these. You get annoyed more than once. You're doing things way outside of your job description. You overshare or allow others to overshare when there's no rapport for that. I remember a time I was talking to someone that I think it was like I don't remember the time, but we just didn't have that rapport. And she was like, "Oh, girl." And I was like, "Oh, no." So, oversharing. You always find yourself in someone else's work lane. You are the only one initiating conversations about work or projects. You are insulted, demeaned, degraded, or experiencing microaggressions. And I put a little definition there. You feel negative about yourself after meeting with others on your team, which you should never feel that way. And if you ever do on this team, speak up right away so that we can get that handled because that is not the culture that I don't believe any of us desire that, but it can happen. You feel at another's mercy and like your time doesn't matter. Does that any of those, not only for this job, but maybe in the past, do any of those resonate with anybody?
Yes. Oh my goodness. It sounds so weird. And I'm in school for this. And yet I just sort of hadn't connected the dots that some of these were behaviors that were worthy of boundary settings. I'm especially thinking back to my young adulthood, sort of that period between like 22 to 26,
Mhm.
when you're sort of like learning what's the norm in workplaces. And now I'm like looking back and going, oh goodness, yes. Like, wow, I needed someone to help me understand that it was possible to set boundaries in these because it certainly, well, and now I'm going to overshare, but I ended up like
Go ahead.
leaving a position because I like leaving a workplace because I just felt like I was doing everyone else's work and just all these different things, and like I was the only one who wanted to talk about the things that needed to be talked about, and um, leaving every day feeling negative. And I think I had just thought, oh, it's a toxic work environment without ever doing the reflection of, what power did I have? What could I have done to maybe establish a more clear role for myself and set boundaries? So I'm really appreciating this.
Yes, absolutely. And I too have been there. I don't know about anybody else, but early 20s, zero boundaries. Like anything went. And more so on my part where I could have spoken up, but there was a fear due to quite a different things. Like I mentioned, like there's family of origin, there's like you have bills to pay, so you don't want to, rock the boat. In my case, race race played a factor. So we have all of these different things, and you're going in every day, keeping your head down, just trying not to rock the boat. However, you always have a right. And I really feel like rejection can sometimes be redirection. And so if leaders or people are not open to being in a healthy relationship with you, um, and appreciating what you bring to the table, then you automatically know we need to change some things, right? And so I think for leaders, I was thinking about this yesterday, we should always absolutely be in a place where we can always be kind, we can always be open, we can always be approachable, even if I set my boundary and they're not open to it. They're not there yet. We don't have to leave on bad terms, but I know that there's decisions that need to be made on my part, whether it's in my department or, the company overall, what have you. So a few reasons why, we don't speak up. Adam Grant says being a nice person is about courtesy. You're friendly, polite, agreeable, and accommodating. When people believe they have to be nice in order to give, they fail to set boundaries. Rarely say no and become pushovers, letting others walk all over them. Reasons we don't speak up. And this is going to be really hard, guys. I'm doing a lot of squinting here. I'm not sure why I can't make this a little bit bigger, but here goes. We don't understand how to set boundaries. We don't understand how to enforce boundaries. Fear is a big factor, fear of backlash. What's going to happen to this relationship if I set this boundary? I often say, if you set a boundary and, people aren't open to it, maybe those aren't your people and you need to rethink that. And so I've gotten, well, what about family? Well, what about best friends? Well, what about that? Then it gives those people the time to take in what you're asking for as it relates to your expectations, as it relates to your needs. It gives them time to say, hey, I really want this person in my life. Let's sit down and talk over this. Let's try to come to some type of compromise before, like Lindsay said, you just, boom, you got to cut that off. And what I found as I worked through my time of rigid boundaries is that I was able to come back around to the table with some people, and we were able to come to a compromise because of my growth and their growth. But unfortunately, there are going to be some people, some organizations, some corporations that are just like, nope, this is how we do it and not changing. And so there's a reason for that fear, because a lot of times we're giving out so much because we haven't had a boundary that we fear, oh my God, what happened if I lose it? What happens if I lose this relationship altogether? I often say as well, a lot of times our breakdown leads to our breakthrough. And so we have this big breakthrough, and it becomes like a canvas where not only we can set boundaries, but we give others that we either care about, love, or that we work with the opportunity to think about what they want as well. So it can be good as well. Fear of being mean. This was a big one for me. Because, I think politeness, my grandmother put that deeply in me. Politeness is a good thing. But I think again, at one point in time in my life, it overshadowed what should have been happening, which is setting healthy boundaries. Let's see what else. Unwritten rules, like things are grandfathered in. I really don't like that, because when things are grandfathered in, we often don't look at the effectiveness or the ineffectiveness of things. And we need to have a growth mindset in order to be relative. And so, again, those are times where we can be a catalyst of change. You're feeling weird or wonky about future interactions. And the only thing I will say to that is just bring your authentic self to work every day as much as you can, right? As much as you can. And I know that we act differently with different people. My daughter and I still jump on the bed and tell jokes and all kinds of stuff at home. So of course I'm not going to do that here with you all because I don't have that rapport with you and I don't want you feeling weird and awkward and all of that. So I'm going to remain as professional as I can. But like Sarah just mentioned, I'm going to overshare. Well, she has that rapport with us, right? So yeah, so we can do that and we can be catalysts of change, and not have to worry about weird future interactions. And I think that we can talk through anything. We struggle with boundaries in our personal life. So, excuse me, that shows up at work. We cross our own boundaries. We don't keep our own word to ourselves. If I'm honest, over the last, I say 10 years, it has been, this is it. I'm keeping my word to myself. And the more you keep your word to yourself, the more you trust yourself, which is what you need to gain or regain confidence. Like I mentioned, those traumatic events, that I went through early on. Gosh, there just was no trust there. And so I had to regain that trust first with myself before I could do that with anybody else. So um, the last one, or the second to last, you can flop around in, and you just kind of expect everybody else to operate like that. And then the last one, you're a superhero from another planet, so you don't need to set boundaries. But there are reasons why we should set good boundaries. And I know one thing, I'm going to be talking to Alexis after this because I need some technology help. I cannot see these slides. Reasons for setting good boundaries. Now, there's some slides on here that you can see. Anybody want to throw out some reasons to set good, healthy boundaries? No. Okay.
Well, I can definitely, sorry, I was taking a moment to read through these because I didn't want to say something that was already out here. So I was trying to think of something that's not here, and you just have such a comprehensive um list. But yeah, I guess to bring some of these together, one thing I think of is that when you are setting boundaries, you're having integrity to yourself, which creates a fancy therapy term is congruence, like the sense that you're being authentic with yourself, your actions are equating to your thoughts and your feelings, and you're sort of equally weighing what's best for you and what's best for others. Anyway, so setting boundaries helps you achieve congruence. And when you're in a state of congruence, your relationships are more authentic, you're less likely to be taken advantage of, you're less likely to, well, you're more likely to inspire positive relationships because you're more assured of who you are. And so then you can sort of tell who meshes and who doesn't. Anyway, sorry, I think I touched on a few of the the ones you wrote there though.
No, that's excellent. That's good. And everybody can see these, so I'm not going to read all of them. The one that really, really resonates with me is that, a reason for setting healthy boundaries, it's a great self-care practice. I think self-care doesn't start on the outside. I think it starts on the inside. It starts with the congruence Sarah is talking about. It starts with keeping your word to yourself. It starts with understanding your self-worth, especially at work, what you bring to the table, your skills, your assets, your abilities, and growing those over time. Um, I have been in a position at work where it's like, oh my gosh, I don't really care to be here, blah, 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 all of these reasons. But as it was mentioned earlier, I didn't take the time to fully reflect on what I wanted. And that is a huge part of setting boundaries. You can eliminate so much frustration by stopping and thinking, what do I want? What do I really want? Because maybe you can get it right where you're at, right? And you can, instead of being the rose coming out of concrete, you can be the rose in all the fields and good soil and have everything around you that you need by just speaking up. So here. Okay, so those are reasons for setting good boundaries. And quick video: to be unclear is to be unkind. I hope this works. Can you see this?
I'm afraid we're just still seeing the PowerPoint. Maybe if we stop sharing and then reshare the web link.
Okay.
We can watch it by ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah, I can just click on this link and then it opened me in the YouTube.
Okay. Can you guys hear that? Or is it just me?
Yeah, we're watching it on our own and it's working perfectly.
Wonderful. Okay. Are we back? Okay. How do I turn that off? All right. Are we back?
I'm back. I don't know about others. I might have started a bit before others.
Okay.
I'm back too.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Wonderful. So the point in that is just how unclear he was about everything. Like he was on his own journey, his own mission. None of his team were on board with him. He is the dance captain of whatever. There's no respect there, none of that. The point is, just don't be like that. Be very clear in what you want and what you need to say to set your boundaries. Did anything pop out to anyone about that? Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
For me, it was when he was talking to oh, I'm ashamed to call myself an Office fan because I'm blanking on his name, but when he was talking to his boss, and it really sounded like he was going somewhere for a sec. And he was like, the most important thing is to never, ever, under any, just all of that. And I was like, he's about to do it. He's going to set a boundary. And then he just didn't. Like, he actually had no thought where he was going. I just loved that.
Zero. There's so many no's in there. Yeah, pretty ridiculous. So we have about, I think, 4 minutes or something like that left. So there is a tips for workplace boundaries, another really good video that I added on here. You can also watch that at your own convenience. And it just goes through 8 really good steps on how to put into practice workplace boundaries. All right. Do you need to set healthy boundaries? Yes, you do. So I'm going to speed through this. Again, I'm not sure how to make that bigger. So you feel overwhelmed. You feel resentful toward people for asking for help. You are sick of drama or politics. You avoid text or calls from people, personal or professional. You may say, I help them, but I never get anything returned. Burnout. You want to disappear. You do not have time for yourself, and you're always on, meaning like you can never just relax. You're always on. You're always doing something. You're always busy. This is a time where you need to set healthy boundaries. How do I do this? Most important part, communication and action. You need to verbally communicate your needs. You need to uphold what you are communicating through your behavior. Huge, huge, huge. I cannot say that enough. It's important. Here's an example. It's important to me that we all meet the agreed upon deadline. If you need help meeting the deadline, or to change the deadline, please email, call, or text me 3 days prior to the deadline. That's clear. Does everybody find that clear? Give me a thumbs up if you find that clear. Sweet. Violation. It's a day late. What do? You just start going off and going ham on everybody. No. And you may feel that way. Emotions is a big part of boundary setting. Here's a tip. Talk through. If you need to take time before you talk to someone, do it. I don't care if you have to count to 10 backwards. I don't care if you have to talk to yourself and talk through how you're feeling. You need to release your emotions so you can effectively communicate. And your emotions are not bad. Don't judge them. Just talk yourself or write yourself through them so that you honor yourself in a way that when you get in front of other people, you're saying exactly what you mean. Your yes is yes and your no is no, right? So it's violation, it's late. You need to gently reinforce with action. Unfortunately, when blank happens, I feel blank because of blank, and what I really need is blank. If this happens again, here's the healthy consequence. So you can say that however you want to say it. You know, unfortunately, when you're late, I feel sad or frustrated or overwhelmed because you're not on time with the part that you agreed to. And what I really need is for you to be on time so that we can turn our report in on time. If this happens again, I will, you know, bring in the director to see how we can talk through time management. Simple. And then to bring it to a full loop, say it's you violated the boundary. I'm sorry. There's no excuse for what has happened here. I won't do it again. And then ask what they want or need right now. And they may say, you know what, I need you to do XYZ part of this report. I'll take care of the rest. And our deadline is now 5 p.m. tomorrow. So, yeah. All right, sweet. Always remember professionalism. I mentioned that. Remember, when you're at work, this is a business. I get scared. I'm going to be transparent when I always hear people say, "Oh, our business is like a family," and I think about, "Oh, my family." So, always, always, always remember professionalism. Do your best to not take things personally. A huge leadership lesson for me, which I learned a long time ago, is people. You're to collaborate with people. If you're a leader, you lead people, you manage work, right? Do your best every day, but don't take on more than you have to, and do not overextend yourself. Do what you have time for, money for, skill for, energy for, right? And I realize sometimes we want to be helpful, so we jump on board. That's absolutely acceptable. Absolutely acceptable. It's when it keeps happening over and over again that we need to say, light bulb, maybe we need to set a boundary here. Get clear on what your role is and what your job description says. And this way you can prevent some of these things when it's time, if it's ever time. I hope it's never time, but you have to come to me and say, hey, this is what's happening. What are your boundaries? Where are we at? 1246. What are your boundaries? Why are they important to your role? And do they align with the company's expectation? Maybe you're at the wrong place, and I hope none of you are. Do your boundaries align with your company culture? Outline your expectations before you talk with your manager. Have the conversation with context instead of just changing your behavior. The result of that is passive aggressive behavior, which is fun for no one, not even the person exhibiting the behavior. So before you get to that, do some reflection. Happy employees, productive employees. Here's another video, Brene Brown, and I think you're really gonna Be Like Max. We can either watch the video and you can watch it on your own. If you wanna watch it now, thumbs up. If you wanna watch it on your own, do nothing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's watch it. Here you go. All right, it sounds like, or looks like, excuse me, we are all done. The last video is what I hope you feel like. Remember when I first started out, I said that boundaries bring such peace. And some of the things that Brene Brown was talking about were so profound. Before we go, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
I think I'm still trying to wrap my head around some of the things Brene said. Well, I mean, this entire presentation has been fantastic, but like empathy without boundaries isn't empathy is something that I'm just still trying to like wrap my head around it and reconcile it with my experience because it just is so profound.
Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, and
agree.
if you're thinking, that's okay. Go ahead.
I agree with Sarah. I think just really digging deep and understanding where your boundaries are coming from, and that they, empathy extended to others where it's not extended to yourself primarily, it like comes at a price. And so being able to extend yourself the grace, and then that ultimately being, your way of authentically connecting with others instead of resentfully. I think that's something that's really important to remember. So thank you. This was a really great presentation.
And I totally hear both of you. Like, I often think, okay, how much of this is ego, right? How much of this is ego? And it really makes you reflect. Like, I can listen to that over and over and just keep finding little nuggets in that that will help me first personally develop so that I can be my best for me first and then for others, for you all at work, which is one of the very biggest goals that I have. Now, to close out, please watch the last video and just put what you feel about that in the chat. I know we're getting ready to end, but please watch the last video. And I hope that you are like Max when you set a boundary and you feel great and you feel like dancing and you feel more peace, whether that's in your personal life or your professional life. Because always remember, we set boundaries for people who we want to be in relationship with. And hopefully they have the same ideas about us. Again, professional or personal. I hope that as we're all here at REWA, there is an openness to where we can communicate, and that whether it's me or someone else, there is a bridge to not only setting healthy boundaries, but being open to change, being open to remaining relative and growth, because if you're not growing, you're not going anywhere. So yeah, thank you guys again for this time that we spent together today. Any feedback, I'd love. You can just shoot it to me in the chat or an email, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Kim. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. No worries, Anna.